This is the Caliph Podcast. I'm Karusoli and we are on episode 15. My guest today is Umar Mushi, the social entrepreneur and Islamic 500 influencer of the Islamic economy. You are the co-founder and managing director of Ethis Global, the world's first property Islamic crowdfunding platform backed by 21,000 members across the world. Your company has helped to build more than 9,000 houses, helping families break out of poverty. Since you started Ethis in 2014, Ethis has won numerous awards for its impact investments and attracting large investors and donors around the world. You are also the chairman of Islamic FinTech Alliance and CEO of Global Sadaqah. We are here to talk about Islamic finance, the sharing economy, Islamic FinTech, and more. Umar, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the Caliph Podcast.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullah. Thank you for that long introduction.
Thank you for taking your time off for this our session. I mean, you are one of the first person that I actually wanted to interview when I started this idea back then. So I'm really glad that you agreed to do this.
Yeah, my pleasure. Inshallah, I'll be able to provide some interesting information.
Yeah. So before we start, I just want to I just want to know, like, how has it been back in Malaysia?
Well, in Malaysia,
with all the
lockdown
outbreak
and
is doing
everything,
well.
right?
Yeah. So how is it like? I'm sure it's different in Singapore here, right? So how's it like?
Yeah. Well, Malaysia has been under lockdown, sort of a restricted movement for, I think, about 2 months, and only recently they allowed for so-called conditional restricted movement.
Mm-hmm.
But in the state that I'm living in right now, which is in Selangor, which is just outside Kuala Lumpur, it is still, I believe it's still under the restricted movement. So basically people aren't moving much, they aren't going out much, they're staying at home most of the time. And for me, it's, for all businesses across the board, I assume that there will be some form of challenges.
Correct.
Very few maybe have additional opportunities in this environment, but for us, it has been a mix of both. We have had challenges, which means that we've been forced to adjust or pivot our approach. But at the same time, there are interesting opportunities that are coming up because of this. Yeah. Personally, I like working at home. I've always spent more than half my time working from home, even from the past. And now that everybody is at home, people understand me better.
Nice. Okay. Right. So for those who don't know you, for the audience, maybe you can share a bit about yourself before we jump into the question.
Sure. You mean my background?
Yeah, sure. Just a general one.
Right. Yeah, just a quick one. I'm basically an entrepreneur. I do not have any corporate experience or working experience. I've been doing my own thing since I was 18, which is about half my life. And I actually found entrepreneurship while I was doing national service in Singapore, which is not so common, I guess. Because, very regimental environment. At the same time, I have this urge to do something outside of that. And that's how it started. And I spent quite a long time in Indonesia, a short stints of time in the Middle East and Malaysia. Mm-hmm. And about 3.5 years ago, I moved to Malaysia, to Kuala Lumpur, and now Selangor, to run the business from here. Yep.
All right. So let's start with the first question, where I want to hear like the whole journey of your entrepreneurship since 18 years old. So maybe step by step. You have the time.
Wow.
So yeah.
All right. So 18 years, 1 year, 10 minutes, 180 minutes is too long. So I'll have to keep it short.
Sure.
Well, maybe I can divide it into certain phases. So when I started, when I was 18, and I posted a short video on my LinkedIn. What happened was that I had this, my friends actually, a few of my friends, we had this urge to do business or to do something together. And I actually did two things. One was an online business, and the other one was I joined a company as a direct salesman and a sales agent because I wanted to learn from these guys. And they were successful Chinese businessmen and salespeople in Singapore who were very aggressive. So that's where I started learning about entrepreneurship and also mainly about sales from that company. And on the other hand, as I mentioned, I set up an online business. At that time, e-commerce wasn't so common or so known. So in some sense, we were accidentally a pioneer. And in my business journey, I always accidentally become a pioneer, which is great because it gives you a lot of opportunity, but it's also a double-edged sword because, you know, it is challenging when you are the first or when the rest of the world doesn't really understand what you're doing or what you're trying to do, and you have to break through a lot of barriers, right? But yeah, at that time we basically set up an online platform or website for car body modifications, right? When we were 18 years old, 19 years old, yeah, and that lasted for about 2 years while we were in national service. And then my two co-founders, who were my school friends, one went to one went to law school, one went to life sciences, and I went to business school. So obviously they became very busy, and I wanted to learn business. Yeah. So then, so those 2 years was very good. We learned a lot of things, mainly to open up our minds to opportunity. That, you know, it doesn't matter how old you are or what you know or what you don't know, you can find opportunity out there, and you can potentially make a business out of it. Then I went to university, and I spent officially a year there, but most of the time I was not really in university. I found that it was a bit too dry and too rigid for me. I was impatient. I wanted to learn how to do business, but business school was not teaching me that at that time.
Yes.
So after a year, I took a leave of absence from university. Supposed to go back, but I never did. Yeah. About 2 years, then I set up a restaurant in Singapore, a cafe restaurant with some friends, because we made money from the direct sales activity that we were doing. We were selling some nanotech products from Japan, and that, you know, premium products. So we made some money, and we set up a restaurant. Honestly, restaurants are very difficult to operate, especially in a high-cost country like Singapore.
Yes.
We did survive for 2 years, and it was a very tough, difficult experience. I realized that, you know, you can do business without understanding it fully, but for something like a restaurant, you need, you know, people who are very strong in terms of their expertise of how to run it. You can't learn it on the go. Yeah, so that was a tough, a good experience. But the main positive was that I built up a good network from the restaurant. You know, people who came to the restaurant became friends. Friends came to the restaurant. Business associates came to the restaurant, and, you know, it helped to break the ice. It helped to build up my relationships, and that's what actually bridged me to make the move to Indonesia. When I was, I think, 21 or 22 years old, I decided I'll go to Indonesia. I had made 2 or 3 friends from the restaurant who were Indonesian. And that's all I knew about Indonesia. So I thought, I'll take this product that I've been selling, get the distributorship, and then do it in Indonesia. I spent something else I want to add as well is that I joined the Malay Chamber of Commerce. So for those of you who are, you know, young entrepreneurs in Singapore, do join the Malay Chamber of Commerce, or, you know, if you're a different race, in Singapore is race-based. There's Indian chambers, Chinese chambers, and so on. Because the people you meet, the relationships, as well as the access to other markets is very, very useful. So what I did at that time was I joined Malay Chambers. I joined them because they recognized some of my work, and I got not an award, but I was a finalist for Young Entrepreneur of the Year in 2006, I think. And so I got to know them, and I joined them for a business trip to Indonesia, and that's where I made even more contacts. Right? So then when I was 21 and a half or 22, I decided to make the jump to Indonesia, to try my luck in the wild east of Indonesia. A huge market, you know, a lot of market gaps, a lot of opportunities, but also everybody's warning me, don't go to Indonesia, it's risky and dangerous.
Yes.
Right? So, but I did go, and I stayed there. In the first 1.5 years, I just tried to sustain and survive. I stayed in Bali first for about a year to try and build up over there, because Jakarta seemed to be a little bit too big and too aggressive and too competitive. So I went to Bali and did business in shorts and a motorbike for a while. Yeah, it was quite fun, but it was also a small market. But somehow from Bali, the Jakarta network grew, and then I moved back to Jakarta. Yeah, and Alhamdulillah, stayed in Jakarta for about 5-6 years. The business was tough, but we didn't have a period where it was really good. Essentially what happened was, how much detail do you want me to go into? I can talk for a long
Go
time
on, go
about
on,
this.
go on.
Okay,
I'm
sure. Just
enjoying.
interrupt me anytime, all right?
Sure.
Because I tried to do podcasts recently, and sometimes I find myself having to interrupt, and it's a bit difficult not to be rude. So feel free to
Yeah.
interrupt anytime.
Yes, I understand.
Right. So back in Jakarta, we were lucky because the product that we were marketing was a high-end Japanese therapy product using
Ooh.
nanotech. At that time, was quite advanced, and it helped to regulate your body systems, and you could over time recover from almost anything.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened was we had a very good testimonial. I mean, he's passed away now many years later. But at that time, he's a celebrity or a well-known personality in Indonesia, and he was paralyzed waist down. And everybody knew about it. It was a high-profile case. So when he started using our product for therapy, he felt the result, in terms of his blood circulation and everything immediately. And in a few weeks from that point in time, we gave him a free sample. A few weeks later, his hands could start moving, and after a few months, he could start moving his legs. So it was like, wow, this is a great testimonial. We became close friends as well. And from that one testimonial, it gave us credibility in a very competitive market. Indonesia is very competitive. Jakarta is very competitive. And so we spread out quite quickly, and the business became a B2B business. So that was good for a while. And then we expanded to other parts of Indonesia. My current co-founder for Ethis today, Ronald Wijaya, he joined me as an intern initially, and then he became a manager, and then he became my partner. So he set up in daerah. Indonesia, for those of you who are interested in Indonesia, there are many, many worlds in Indonesia. Jakarta is a different world. Other areas, other cities are different world, and when you go to the rural areas, it's a different world altogether. Right? And what we realized was that there was a big demand for our product in the daerah, or in the smaller towns and cities. And we set up in Makassar, which today is one of the biggest cities already. At that time, it was still growing. And business became very, very good. However, all of this collapsed very, very quickly. I built up the business over 6-7 years.
Nice.
And essentially what happened was that our supplier actually had problems, and he was not forthcoming. In fact, what he did was, in a sense, sabotage us. So we were going to go to another level because the business foundation was strong. We found some good active partners in Indonesia who were very much in the medical scene, and this guy basically had problems with his supply. He was our supplier based in Singapore. And so he collected a big stock deposit from us for a new batch of improved version of the product. And then he disappeared. And when that happened, basically we had put all we had with him. We were a little bit trusting because we've been doing business for 6-7 years. And he's a chartered accountant, so he knows how to organize things nicely for himself to close down his business and disappear. So when that happened, we were under debt. I was under significant debt personally. The business was forced to close down, and I moved back to Singapore to try and pick up the pieces. So that's something that is important, maybe, that I want to highlight. Even when you have a party that you've been working with for a long time, that you trust, that you've made money for and with, at any point in time, people can change and circumstances can change, and things can change very quickly. So never just trust someone, even if it's your own partner, without having proper things properly documented and the risks mitigated. Right. So that's something that I learned the hard way. And maybe I'll backtrack a little bit to something else I want to share as a learning point. When I was in Jakarta and Bali for the first 1.5 years, I was basically looking for a local partner to invest in my business, right? And all the while, there was this gentleman that I made friends with when he came to my restaurant in Singapore, who was not interested in my business. He's already very wealthy, and he found my business to be too complicated. And he said, I will support you as a brother, as a friend, but not invest in you. And after 1.5 years of looking for a partner and eventually finding a few good options, he told me, Umar, I'll invest in you. Forget about those guys. Because I see you have that one quality that an entrepreneur needs, which is commitment and dedication and, perseverance, basically. The never say die attitude. And so he became my partner. Yeah. So 2 lessons that I hope, all of you can learn from my difficult experiences. It's easier to learn from others rather than going through all the pain yourself sometimes.
Correct. Yep.
So first is you need to be very persistent if you're going to be going to be an entrepreneur. You need to keep looking for ways to make it happen. And secondly, don't trust someone too much. Don't trust anyone too much. So maybe I'll stop there because after this it goes into the transition towards Ethis.
Right. So okay, how did so from there? So you came back to Singapore. You pick up all the pieces, right? So how did Islamic finance, the passion for Islamic finance came to you, and from there you transitioned to Ethis. Yeah, how did all of that happen?
So when I was back in Singapore, I set up a new business, and then basically I had 2 businesses when I came back to Singapore, and I had no money. I was in debt at that time. Before this, I had a nice car and some lifestyle, material possessions in Singapore, which was taken on credit. So when the business collapsed, and when I was, when I had no money and no cash flow, so the banks or the financial institutions that used to be very nice and friendly with me suddenly became very aggressive and very mean. And basically my car was repossessed and things like that. And so I was under debt at the age of about 26, I think.
Were you married that time?
I was already married, yeah. I was married for about 2 years. So my wife was quite stressed up, obviously. But somehow, maybe because I've been an entrepreneur for so long, and also partially from my upbringing, from quite a religious family, where my mom especially, has taught us that whatever comes to you is something that's already decided beforehand, it's already preordained, and you have to accept it, and you have to see if you view it positively, whether it's good or whether it's even though it's bad, then it is and it will be something good for you, inshallah. Right? So I was quite relaxed to the extent that people were worried about me. They say, "Are you in denial? Are you okay? How come you're not worried?" And I told them, "There's nothing I can do about it. What's done is done. I only can move forward." Right? So then I set up 2 businesses. The first was basically not really a business. At the start, it was just giving private tuition. My whole family, we're all private tutors. A lot of people in Singapore know the Mushi tutors, my mom, dad, and siblings. And so what I did was I started teaching my 2 favorite subjects. Initially, it was English for primary school, secondary school, whatever I could find just to get by. I gave tuition. I traveled across the island to give tuition on my motorbike. Best investment ever was that $1,000 motorbike, which really did a lot for me. Now you don't have $1,000 motorbikes in Singapore anymore. So at that time I gave private tuition, and eventually I organized it to be a scalable business where I was giving lessons to pre-university students with a subsidy from Mendaki, which was a government related body for low-income students. So that gave me a good new market to serve because nobody was serving them. They couldn't afford to pay. Now with this new subsidy that came about because me and a few others were pushing for it, then it became a viable business. So that gave me good cash flow to clear my debts over time. My bank debt was cleared by family and friends because the interest was just killing me. So fortunately, they came forward and they helped me to clear that amount, and I pay them back directly. Now, the second business that I started was in Islamic Finance. So as I shared just now, bad incidents or tragedies in your life can actually turn out to be good, right? And in this case, this business downfall actually, brought me a lot of realization. Firstly, that my approach to life and my lifestyle and my objectives and my focus was not really correct. It wasn't very Islamic. It wasn't maybe even very ethical, or proper. Being a young man away from home before I got married and later on got married in a foreign country, you tend to get sucked into the business norms that are not necessarily good for you, right? So I realized that I was involved in things that I should not be involved in. When I was in Indonesia, I mixed with extremes, really extremes. Maybe I'll touch on that a little bit. Sure. I mixed with very, very religious, pious, proper, ethical people from the, over there they call them Habibs and the ulama. And I also mixed with those who were very dubious and did strange things. I mean, I did not necessarily do those things, but I mixed with these people. Right? Because I wanted to explore the world. I wanted to see both extremes. So it's not necessarily good to dabble in all things. Sometimes it's better to not know. But alhamdulillah, I saw various things and I decided, and alhamdulillah, I had the opportunity to come back to be a proper Muslim, inshallah, or try to be a proper Muslim. So when I was in Singapore, that's where I found Islamic Finance, because the banks that were chasing me, I realized there was something wrong with the financial world, the financial system, right? Because I was supposed to pay the bank $1,000, was a financial institution, $1,000 a month for my car loan. The car was repossessed, and out of that, $700 was interest payments, penalty payments. So essentially, I was only paying $300, or 1/3 of what I was paying was going to clearing this debt, which means that it will take forever. Right? So I was lucky that I had family and friends to help me clear the debt, and then I paid them back with no interest. But not a lot of people fall into that trap, And this trap is not only at the individual level; it's also at the global scale.
Correct.
Today, you see countries borrowing money. The repercussions will come in a few years' time, and it will probably last for a long time. So that's when I realized something was wrong. And one of my close friends in Singapore introduced me to Islamic Finance. It's actually somebody that you interviewed before, but I won't mention his name.
Abdul Rahman.
Abdul Rahman. Abdul Rahman is my college friend. He was also my first partner, my first business.
Nice.
So he introduced me to Islamic Finance, and then I read up about it, and we set up Amanah Asset Management to introduce to build up the base of Islamic Finance, the Islamic Finance demand in Singapore. Right. So we gave free classes, free talks, also paid events. We tried to bring in products from overseas. Nothing worked out because they deemed the market to be too small. But we also provided through Abdul Rahman's law firm, estate planning services, and so on. That then was the impetus for Ethis to start, because the community started to form and there was nothing for them to invest in, right? Or there were very few options. And so we formed a private investment club called Club Ethis. In fact, from the beginning, we wanted to call it crowdfunding because I had found that concept online. And I saw that it was very interesting, and there was nothing like that in this part of the world. But there were no regulations yet. Regulations have been a key challenge for us, and today it's a key value proposition that we have, because finally we have licenses. But for the longest time, we did not have licenses. They were just not available, or we were in the process of getting them. So when we started, we got advice from lawyers and so on. So we just formed a private investment club. And in 2016, we went online, and it became full online, and became a crowdfunding platform called Ethis Crowd. So that's how Ethis started. From the demand in Singapore from Islamic finance enthusiasts who wanted to invest in Islamic opportunities. And since I had my existing network in Indonesia, my relationships there from my time there, I reached out to them. And in our first year, alhamdulillah, Club Ethis, we invested, the community invested in close to 20 projects, a mix of local startups, SMEs, as well as Indonesian property. And alhamdulillah, we have quite a few prominent businesses in Singapore that we funded and that are doing quite well today. And we're very happy about that. But in 2016, we decided to pivot or to adjust our approach to focus only on Indonesia and specifically mainly on social housing development projects. Okay, so that's a summary of how Ethis started.
Yeah. Okay. Why is there a rise in sharing economy and crowdfunding?
Sure. Sharing economy, I mean, maybe I'll just touch on it briefly. It's the, I guess, the approach of not so much of business to consumer. It also includes consumer to consumer, business to business, business to business to consumer, and all these different acronyms, B to B to C and to C and to D. Point is, it's about how people can provide products and services to each other, whether through businesses or not. Right? That's my understanding of the sharing
Yeah.
economy. And most famous examples would be, of course, all the ride-hailing companies, Grab and Uber, right?
Yeah.
But as well as, you know, even Carousel and all these other apps that we know. So crowdfunding is when finance is implemented in the sharing economy approach, right? Where people fund people, where people provide opportunities to other people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think this is a combination of various factors. First is everybody's digital, everybody's mobile,
Right.
everybody's online. I mean, we still have the digital divide, but it's being breached very, very quickly. So especially in countries that are already digital, you know, everybody wants to have this immediate, direct access to products and services. Okay, and big businesses are not necessarily always able to do that, right? So that's on one side. Now, concurrently, at the same time, there are a lot of market gaps, and there are a lot of inefficiencies because big businesses over time become complacent or, you know, start to implement barriers to entry, and so some products become expensive or difficult or basically not up to the expectation of consumers. And then consumers realize that since we are all connected, we can get it from each other, right? If you're driving to work every day, why not I hitch a ride with you instead of, you know, taking a taxi, right? If you are an individual with excess cash and you're looking for businesses to invest in, but you don't have access to businesses, then why not go to a platform? And the platform can then curate these businesses for you. Right? So that's these are a few of the factors that I see. There is a need for disruption. There's a need for new business models that because there are all these gaps that are not being served by the incumbents, right? And I wanted to go one step further and link this up to Islamic finance. So earlier on I mentioned, right, I developed this interest in Islamic finance because I was a victim of the financial system. But when I started studying and understanding Islamic finance, I realized that it's very participatory. It's based on justice. But later on, I realized that a lot of the Islamic financial products out there, Islamic banking specifically, is not too far different in terms of how it's implemented. The technical structures, the contracts, and all that are different, and there is value. I'm not saying it's all bad, right? It is better, I would say, but still, if I had done that financing with an Islamic financial institution, if it were available in Singapore, and if I had gone into the same situation of default, it will still be a problem, even though it's an Islamic bank, right? So that's where when we started crowdfunding, we realized that again, accidentally, this was a form of Islamic finance that seemed to be very close to its actual nature and spirit. Yeah, and I did not realize that at first. How I realized it was when suddenly the Islamic finance fraternity and thought leaders and big businesses became excited about what we were doing. We were doing it just to solve a need, right? And suddenly these big guys were telling us that, "Well, this is really great. You know, I fully support what you're doing. This is very Islamic." You know, so Alhamdulillah, we somehow accidentally bumped into this, and since then we've taken it up, you know, with as much gusto as we can, because it's a big responsibility to lead so-called the future version of Islamic finance, or one of the future versions of Islamic finance. Yeah. So back to sharing economy. I believe sharing economy is a very Islamic concept, because in Islam it's about community, it's about supporting each other. And if you go deep into the Islamic economic approach, where you have the safety net of zakat, where those who have extra give to those who need, who are in need. And then there's also the safety net of wakaf, which is essentially endowment, right? If these things are properly implemented, then we wouldn't have the inequality that we have
Yes.
today,
Right.
right? So the sharing economy is a model that is based on community, and Islam is based also on the community. So I feel that the convergence of these two can lead to a lot of good things, not only for Muslims and Muslim communities, but also for humanity.
Right. I
Does
totally
that make
agree with you.
sense?
Yes, totally.
All right.
Okay, so we Ethis campaign has been mostly in Indonesia and some in Malaysia and Singapore, right? And recently you
Yes.
have it was listed, Dubai was in the list, right?
Yes.
Correct? Yeah. So maybe you can share with us how did that happen and what was experience like?
Sure. So for any startup founder or any finance person who wants to go into fintech, the biggest barrier is actually licenses or regulatory approvals. All right. So when we started, there were no regulations for what we were doing. And we had a very light touch model in Singapore where we essentially provided information on our platform. It's just content.
Yep.
Right? So project owners will provide content to us and we'll display the content on our platform. And individuals going to the platform can then decide whether they want to invest in this project directly. So they would transfer the money to Indonesia. So we were just an information provider in that sense. We did not transact. And the MAS at that time did ask for players to provide information to them, and we did. And we were not told to apply for any regulations or to stop our activities. And so we continue in that form, right, in an unregulated model. And that's how we build up our proof of concept. And that's why we call it a proof of concept, because the business changes when you have regulatory approval. Right?
Yep.
It opens up a lot of opportunities, and you have to do things differently as well. So we finally got an approval, live platform with an approval in November last year, which is our Indonesian platform. Okay, so before this, technically, we are a content platform in Singapore dealing with our Indonesian entity is a project management company, right? And that project management company works with the developers. Okay,
Yep.
that's how we organized it. In Malaysia, let me go back to Indonesia. So we got the license in Indonesia, took a long time and a lot of effort. But Alhamdulillah, now we have the approval from the regulators. And so we are in the process of scaling up. But of course, the COVID has, put a dent in our plans and we had to adjust accordingly, which we are doing right now. And, we are starting to push out new campaigns again in Indonesia. For Malaysia, it's a long story. But we did get a license 3 years ago in Malaysia, but we never got to use that license. Essentially, what happened was that we had to look for a certain amount of capital, and there was a paid-out capital requirement of 5 million ringgit. And we were, a startup at that time. It was just, me running around in Singapore and my partner running around in Indonesia, and our partners supporting us part-time, right? And some interns. So we didn't have 5 million ringgit, which is about 1.7 million Sing. And so we found an investor. Unfortunately, it turned out that the investor had different ideas and different objectives that conflicted with ours. And so when we did get the license, we were the first Islamic P2P licensed entity in the world. We did not actually start out, right? And we spent a year and a half trying to work things out. We could not come to a consensus, and so we decided to cut our losses. Malaysia also in that period had changes in leadership, and things were very unstable, to say the least. And so we decided, let's just cut off from this relationship, which is not working out, and apply again. And Alhamdulillah, we got a second chance. Middle last year, we got the conditional approval for equity crowdfunding. And now we are in the tail end of getting the so-called go-live approval, and then we can launch. Right? So we will be the first Islamic equity crowdfunding platform in Malaysia, inshallah. And for Dubai, it's the same thing. We spent 2 years talking to regulators, and it's still not live yet because we are still working out some details with the regulators. So being a first mover is challenging in this way.
Yes.
But once you have the approvals, then you're on very solid ground, on firm ground to move forward much faster. So what we've done all the while is essentially proof of concept. We have not really seen Ethis the way we are supposed to be yet. These are all the early days still, although it's a prolonged early days of 6 years. Now we are in a position to move much faster and do a lot more things, inshallah.
Inshallah. Why do you think there is why do you think people are leaning into halal and ethical, impactful investments today?
Sure. Impactful investments and halal investments converge for Muslims, especially practicing Muslims. For non-Muslims, of course, they may not see how the both are the same or aligned, right? So for me as a Muslim, ethics and social good is a subset of Islam already. Right? Islamic finance already includes all of that inherent in its form and system. So I would say today, even before this, there was increased awareness. Maybe because people are more online, so they are more aware, they read more things, they're more exposed. So they are more aware of what's wrong with capitalism, runaway capitalism, what's wrong with the financial system, with all these different crises happening again and again in a cyclical manner. And so there's this realization that something better should be available for us. And that applies to both ethical investors or impact investors as well as Islamic finance in general. Right? So I think it's more of a ground up kind of realization. People became aware of this. Right? Now, with the COVID, this has become more pronounced. People today are even more aware that what we have been doing and how we have been doing things at the larger microeconomic scale, and us individually as part of that system, contributing to that system, it is not sustainable, it is not proper, it is not necessarily fair or the best way of doing it, right? And so there is this very high increased demand for impact investments, and it started mainly in Europe, I would say, a few years ago, and now is growing fast in this part of the world as well. And one of the other aspects that has resulted in this is also a top-down approach where regulators and big stakeholders in finance have started to also introduce this or push this or make this part of a requirement and those kind of things. So I think people just want to so there's two sides coming up, from top down and from bottom up, right? So it's a good situation or position right now for impact investment and ethical investment, because the world really needs a lot of help today. And impact investments don't just make money, they create good. So that'll be my answer.
All right. Okay. In your latest Munshi mornings, right? You shared a bit about the huge opportunities in FinTech and emerging markets. Maybe you can just share a bit here in this platform.
All right, sure. There are a few markets that this is moving very, very fast in parts of Africa, in Kenya, in Indonesia, of course. And before this, the giant that overtook the whole world is China. And China today, of course, some people consider them already past emerging market stage. But essentially they grew their fintech space over the past 7-8 years, and today they will be the market leader in many ways. So just as how it happened in China, it can happen in other countries. Of course, the local context is different. So my exposure is mainly to Indonesia. There was a period of time about 2 years ago when I went to Indonesia after not going there for about a year. Usually I go there every month, but there was a period I didn't go there for almost a year. And when I went there, nobody wanted my cash. Right? Everywhere I went, even small retailers or shops, even paying the toll, they didn't want my cash. They said, "What's wrong with you? We are all using digital money or e-money." Right? So I'm like, okay, sorry, I've been out of it for a while. Even Singapore wasn't as digital as Indonesia at that time. Right? So why is it so? It's because the need is very high. People need to transact, and they want to transact in small amounts. Right? People need to have a way of transacting across the country, and also daily when they interact with their own consumption. So because in a country like Indonesia, the banking system is not as developed as it needs to be. There's a lot of underbanked and unbanked. right? So it just becomes a need. At the first stage, it becomes a need that needs to be solved. So people take up FinTech. And once it starts to gain momentum and it's so much easier and so much better and so much faster and usually even cheaper, then the masters start coming on board, right? So in developed countries, the benefits of FinTech are also there, but the need for FinTech is not that urgent because people already have their bank accounts or their credit cards or whatever. Right? So that's why I feel emerging markets, this need creates the momentum much faster. And then from there, it starts to snowball and grow. Yeah.
How about Islamic finance? Where are we at now? And what's the progression and, where are we heading towards Islamic finance?
All right. With all due respect to all the leaders and all the institutions that have done a great job, developing Islamic finance in the past 30 years, I think really, and also because of the COVID, there's a greater drive towards some kind of reform or evolution of Islamic finance. Because Islamic finance, in my opinion, which is not a very informed opinion, but at the same time, I speak to Islamic finance leaders out there, and they say this as well, that Islamic finance has not managed to really fulfill the objectives that they set out to, which is termed the maqasid al-Sharia, or the objectives of Sharia. Which, I won't go into detail, and I'm not an expert, but one way I can portray this is that it has not managed to uplift those who need help, basically. Right? It has not been inclusive enough. It has not been participatory enough. It has not been impactful enough. So today, Islamic banking is there, and in Malaysia, it's very well developed. And Malaysia is the market leader, but still it serves mostly larger businesses and of course consumers. It does not serve, for example, microfinance is not very strong. Islamic finance is not yet strong there, right? So and outside of banking and outside of the capital markets, capital markets also typically it's big funds for big companies, big projects, right? Not so much at the community level. So that's where I see Islamic finance has not reached its potential. Secondly, Islamic finance has not been able to integrate the commercial finance component with the social finance component well enough. Because if zakat, as I mentioned earlier, zakat, wakaf, and sedekah is well integrated into so-called mainstream or commercial finance, then there'll be a lot of benefits, really a lot of benefits. Today we see the concept of endowment being very big in the Western world, in the non-Muslim world. All the big universities, the famous universities, have huge endowments worth billions. And this concept of endowment came from, originally, the concept of wakaf. So this is some really deep intelligence or knowledge, which, is inspired from divine knowledge that we have with us, that other people are using, non-Muslims are using to very good effect, and we are not doing it enough, right? And then we talk about zakat. Zakat is a tax, it's a kind of tax on wealth and assets, Whereas today we have inequality because most of the taxes is only on income, not on assets. Rich people don't earn or declare a lot of income. What they have is a lot of assets. But typically the assets are not really properly taxed, or there's ways to go around it. And so we have this inequality building up over time and continuing to build up, right? So I think, if we go back to the fundamentals of Islamic finance, and there are so many scholars out there who have written all sorts of books and papers on this. The key now is how do we bring all this theory to be realized in the real world? And to me, the avenue to do that is FinTech. Right? FinTech can and does provide a platform for Islamic finance to be implemented in its true form, or in its purer form, maybe closer to its objectives. Current Islamic finance, everything that is there, Islamic banking, capital markets, will still be there. It still has a role. I'm not saying we have to scrap that and try and do something new. There's a lot of value there, but FinTech needs to come in to complement that and eventually to synergize with it. Yeah.
I'm interested in your views on digital currency, like cryptocurrency and Bitcoin and stuff like that. So, what's your views?
Sure. So again, a disclaimer: I'm not an expert. I try to learn as much as I can, yeah, but I also don't have enough time to learn as much as I want to. But the way I see it is, if you talk about currency as a medium of exchange,
Yeah.
right? It's just a medium of exchange, not as an asset in itself. It'll be different compared to if you're talking about cryptocurrencies as an asset or representing an asset. If it's just a medium of exchange, then I believe it can be very useful, right? And it has there have been use cases where it's very useful because you can have instantaneous transactions globally and so on, and all the other benefits of cryptos being immutable and all that. Those are potentially beneficial when you talk about a currency as a medium of exchange, right? But in today's world, for currency to be properly utilized, it has to either the government has adopted it and endorsed it or accepted it as legal tender. If not, then it cannot be a currency per se. Or it can be some kind of more limited use currency if there's a sizable community that accepts it as a currency, right? So, for example, this sometimes they call it a form of tokenization. So, for Ethis, as we grow, we have Ethis in Malaysia, Ethis in Indonesia, Ethis in Dubai, potentially Ethis in other countries, and then we also have Global Sedekah, which is our charity platform. So we could potentially come up with our own currency for our own community to interact and to transact within our own circle. Right? I think that's where it's the most straightforward, useful value proposition as a currency. Right? But outside of that, for the general market, then it has to involve the government. Right? Now, on the other hand, as an asset, then it's a matter of how the digital asset is legally linked to the real world asset. There was this boom and bust of cryptocurrencies. I had friends who were burnt, and some of them had really good projects. Right? I have a friend. I won't name them, but I was invited to be the advisor, and they did an ICO in 2018, I think, or late 2017. I think 2018. They did an ICO, raised $90 million in I think Ethereum, and then the market crashed. And in a few months, it went down by 20 times, right? So all their plans had to change because initially their plan was based on 19 million, and then now suddenly it's based on, 15, 20 million, right? So that volatility is because all the crypto markets basically tend to follow the Bitcoin market, and until today, I would say there's still no mainstream acceptance or recognition of Bitcoin, and so that makes things complicated if you want to float your currency or your token out there. But I digress from my earlier point, which is about assets. If you want to have a crypto asset, then it needs to be clearly linked to whichever tangible or real world asset it may be. It can be even intangible, for example, IP. Right? IP has real inherent value. So how that digital asset is linked to the intrinsic or inherent value of whatever asset it represents, that is the key, right? So, and I do know that there are instances of or use cases of it being implemented in a good way. And the most obvious use case I can share is probably equity crowdfunding. Because in equity crowdfunding, I'll give you an example. Let's say property investment, right? I'm sure you would want to invest in a good property, right? But maybe you have $5,000 to spare, not $500,000. So what we can do in equity crowdfunding is we can form a company that owns this property, and then you can subscribe to shares in that company. Okay, so this is already being done. It's very common already. Property crowdfunding using equity crowdfunding. So what can happen now is that another layer, which is the blockchain layer, is added on so that you have a digital representation or twin of that share or of that asset. Right? And then that digital representation has all the benefits of the blockchain. You can transact it cross border instantaneously at low cost and so on. Right? So that is how you can have assets in the blockchain. That's one example.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a matter of time, to summarize. It's a matter of time before, the code is cracked properly. I think what's available today, maybe there are things that are technologies that are available that can be implemented on a wide scale already, but has not yet been implemented at that scale today. Right? So I believe this tipping point will come sooner rather than later, maybe by next 1 year, or maybe even in the 2 years. And by that time, the barrier to adopting this technology will get lower, and then it will become mainstream.
Right, got it.
Yeah, that's my view.
Okay. Other than Ethis and global sedekah and what have you, right? What are the things that you have invested your time on?
Sure. In terms of business, I would say it is fully focused on Ethis and the platforms related to Ethis, right? And why that is so is also because my business, or my value contribution to my business, is a lot of also networking and relationship building, right? Which is permanent value as long as the relationships are good. So I don't really see any need to do things outside of Ethis, because I'm very happy with what I do. I'm very passionate about what I do. If I could, I would spend more time working on it, but I have to balance, family and other responsibilities. So yeah, my time is either spent on Ethis and things related to Ethis, and trying to learn up on things related to Ethis, build relationships related to Ethis, as well as the rest of my time is on family.
What's
I
the
don't really have
end
much time
goal?
for.
Yeah. Okay. So what's the end goal for Ethis? Like, how do you envision
Right.
Ethis to be?
Sure. So have you ever traded in cryptocurrencies? Have you bought crypto
No.
before? No? All right. So you use wallets, right? I mean, a few good wallets in Singapore. And the experience is quite good. It's quite easy. You
Yes.
can
Yes.
pay for things,
Right.
buy for things and whatnot. Keep
Yep.
money, withdraw money at any time. Now, if you have a cryptocurrency wallet or crypto wallet, it's similar, but it's global and borderless, right? It takes a few seconds usually for a transaction to happen, but it's very, very fluid. It's very, very easy. Now, we want to have that experience where you just take out your phone, right, and you can transact, you can invest, you can withdraw, you can do whatever you want on your mobile instantaneously, and it's implemented to real-world investment and charity projects and campaigns. All right. So today, you go to our platform, you can see what projects are there. You can, indicate your interest, submit your form, your contract is sent to you. It's all automated, but you still need to make a transfer, and that is still a tedious point of friction.
Yep.
Right. So I would like for that to be fully smooth and easy and global. So now you have a bonus of $100, extra money, $100. And today, if you want to spread it out into $100, I'm not talking about 1,000 or 10,000, $100, and you want to spread it out into, you do some research. Oh, property in Indonesia is booming. I want to put this money into 3 property units in Indonesia. It's impossible, right? Even if it's $1,000, it may not make sense. All the transaction costs and all the hassle. But in future, because we have the technology in future with the blockchain, then you can do it at low cost, almost instantaneously, in very, very small bits and pieces.
Yeah.
Right. So this sounds very ideal, but a lot of people will actually find it very daunting. I have to figure out where to put all my money in so many different options. Right. So then the additional layer that we'll have is an intelligence layer, like a robo advisor. So this is where you can automate the decisions. So you input what you want into the engine, and the engine will help to do it for you, or will prompt you on what to do, and then your money goes out to real world projects.
Yeah.
So if you think about it the way it is today, if you want to put money in South Africa in a project, and you only have $100, you just can't do it, right?
Yeah, it's not possible.
So it's really a quantum leap, I believe, in how money will move, and then people will decide how money moves in future.
Nice.
Yep. So is the vision clear?
Yes, very clear. And I would like not only in terms of Ethis, like it also happens to all other industries also, because right now there's so many barriers out there in terms of international transfers and trade.
Yep.
So this blockchain thingy is going to be a huge thing for everyone to go global. Yeah. Okay. So I want to talk about more on yourself.
Sure.
In the last session, you spoke about just now. You were in debt back then. You're picking up the pieces. I'm just wondering, like, how did your wife handle all of that? Like, was she already, did she already know that you are going to face this kind of things as an entrepreneur? Did she accepted it, or did she like have a change of mind, or you should get a job, or how did you guys handle that and move forward?
Sure. I'll let her know I'm talking about her later on. But yeah, being an entrepreneur's wife, especially one who has not made it yet, it's not easy.
Yeah.
Or for that matter, a husband to an entrepreneur, a wife who's an entrepreneur, right? Because there's so much uncertainty. And one of my friends, Shamir Rahim, who's in Singapore, is also a very prominent startup founder. He posted something very interesting. I mean, I digress a little bit. He posted something on Facebook, I think, about how today all businesses need to think like startups because the world is so uncertain, right? So this mindset of being able to deal with uncertainty and to deal with instability is something that is challenging for a lot of people. Yeah, and I mean, for my wife as well, it's challenging. But I guess one thing that made a difference is I'm very calm, so I try to, she tries to match my calmness, and at the same time also, there's also this understanding from the very beginning that you're marrying me, and this is what I am, and this is how it's going to be.
You made
And
it
we
clear
may
to her.
never, we may never make it. There'll be times where we have no money in the bank. There'll be times where we may have a lot of money in the bank. By the end of the day, we believe that as long as we're sincere and we're trying to do something good, we will at least survive, right? And when the timing comes, then the business will boom, inshallah. My opinion is for business, the main single biggest factor is timing, which is why perseverance is so important, because you keep pushing it. Like yourself now, you're doing podcasts and they are good quality podcasts, right? But I would say you have not yet hit that turning point where you're going to boom, right? But if you keep doing this, it's a matter of time, right? Maybe you have to do 50 podcasts before you become really big, right? We don't know, right? So as long as you keep going at it, inshallah, you'll reach that point.
So you have learned the lessons before, and you literally were in depth. Like, then for now, how do you prepare yourself in terms of financially, right? Like, let's say you are building Ethis, how do you prepare yourself to not fall as badly as before?
Sure. Yeah, so two things that are very important, which I'm still struggling to implement, is that entrepreneurs really need to set aside some money, of course, after you save your basic requirement, to set aside money to invest. And it is a very difficult, sometimes counterintuitive thing to do as an entrepreneur, because you're always passionate first and foremost about your own business.
Yes.
And you always have a tendency to put money back into only your own business. And that's what I did in those 6-7 years in Indonesia, and that's why I'm left with nothing. Right? So you must always allocate some to invest, to grow your money, to make your money work for you. Right? So that's one aspect you have to diversify. Even though you feel you have the most love, passion, control over your own business, but you need to diversify. And that's what I see in all successful entrepreneurs. They always invest in other things as well. This investment can also investment of time, right? So you can invest if you have certain value propositions or something to contribute. You can contribute to other companies, other startups, your time, and then potentially get some equity there. So over time, I've tried to do that here and there, and some businesses worked out, some businesses did not, some are still ongoing. So I know, inshallah, at some point in time when this particular business that I have shares in because I supported them at some point in time, or I continue to support them, then there's some upside there as well. Yeah, but for me, basically, I'm not those kind of, fortunately or unfortunately, I don't really keep a lot of reserves.
Mm.
I always believe that there will be a way to sustain and survive and move on. And even at the most lowest points in my life, alhamdulillah,
Yeah.
somehow there's some
Yes.
way for me to sustain.
You spoke about networking, going out there, other than focusing on Ethis and your family. So is there any tips that you would give for those who wants to build their network?
Sure. I think if it's physical networking and it's online networking, it's a bit different. Right? Of course, online networking is social media,
Yeah.
things related to personal branding, content marketing, and so on. But I guess you're talking more about face-to-face.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
What did you do? Like you did more face-to-face or online, like, or both?
I think it's a combination of both, because both reinforce each other.
Okay,
If
maybe
you
you
go
can
in the
give
same circles.
tips on both.
Sure.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
for social media, it's important for you to have your presence and to have your engagement, basically, to summarize it. And engagement is not about the vanity metrics of how many likes, how many followers, and so on that you have. It's about how many people actively engage with you and have a sense of connection to you, right? Yeah, and that's the most important thing. You can have a small group of followers, but if they have a sense of attachment to you and understanding for you, then they become an actual network, not just numbers on the screen, right? And then it's always good to enforce that or reinforce that with real world communication and contact, a physical world. Right? Which is why when I travel, I try to also meet as many of my Facebook many LinkedIn friends and connections as possible, so that it goes to another level. And face-to-face networking, if it's in an open general setting, then you need to be able to stand out. If you want to capture attention. And stand out can be in many, many ways. You can be creative about it. It can be how you introduce yourself. It can be your name card. It can be your dressing. It can be many different things. What I did early on, and today, unfortunately, I'm pressured by the rest of my company to not do it so much anymore, which is why I'm wearing this now.
Yeah.
It's more formal. But in my early days, I insisted on wearing an Ethis t-shirt in everything I did.
Yeah.
Right. So every event, even high-profile events, meeting ministers and everything, I came with my T-shirt, and there was the giant Iron Man logo there,
and with the website below.
and with the website below, and then it became my branding. And people would, and it worked for me because my approach is I'm not big, I'm not rich, I'm trying to change things, and I need your support, right? And so people saw me as down to earth, and they remembered the brand. And for a few times when I met people, oh, you're the guy with the t-shirt on stage, right? I say, yeah, I'm the guy with the t-shirt on stage. Yeah. So this is what I did, and it worked for us. But now that there's a larger organization, more mature, and so on, so I got to wear something with a collar. I was once blocked from entering the Istana in Indonesia because I was wearing a t-shirt. So some buildings in the Middle East, they don't allow you in because you're wearing a t-shirt. So yeah, now I wear a collar.
So just upgrade for the quality now.
Quality.
Okay, so what are your routines or rituals that you perform regularly that you will never compromise?
Okay. I mean, there's some religious practices that I try to do, which is very, very important. I mean, I haven't been fully consistent with it for the whole period of my life, but right now I'm trying to be more consistent. I mean, my mom's advice, and I think if you Google it, you will see it as well. One is to read Al-Waqi'ah at night, the surah from the Quran. It takes about 10-15 minutes, right?
Yeah.
And you should get used to it quite fast. So alhamdulillah, I've been doing that. And the other one is also to do your duha prayers, which is between Fajr and Zohar.
Yeah.
I try to do it every day, although I do miss it some days. And these are two, practices, for sustenance and for risky or for risk, right? So I believe that these two are very, very important. I try not to miss them. In terms of my routine, I do have a schedule, and I make sure that everybody who I'm interacting with will book my calendar. Like I sent you a link from which you can book my calendar. That's very important. If not, I will forget things. And I block out times to do work so that I'm not disturbed. And the rest of the time, I just do as much as I can. Yeah. So I make sure I spend at least 2-3 hours a day with my toddler daughter and my wife. But the rest of the time, I'm basically working. I work all the time. And I need more time to do more work, but time is limited.
We all need more time. Yeah. I'm interested to know who's your role model and why.
Okay. I don't think I have one role model per se, but there are a number of people that I look up to and that I try to learn from. And alhamdulillah, I'm lucky that a number of them are also on our advisory board. Yeah. So these are senior people who have been there, done that, seen good things, seen bad things. And today, part of the reason why they are my role models is also because today they are trying to give back, and which is a core reason why they are in Ethis as an advisor. Yeah. So, they could easily just, sit on boards and get good income from there and stuff like that without having to go through the maybe some pain in dealing with a startup, right? But they choose to do so. And what I realized is that these people, at the end of the day, their focus and their objective is just to do good and to contribute towards doing good with whatever resources, experience that they have. Yeah, and that's what I want to do as well, right? So to me, as long as the objective is right, the effort is right, the intention is right, then that's what I should be doing with my life.
What makes a great entrepreneur?
A great entrepreneur, I think I'm trying to inculcate this in my team now because we have a smaller team. We had a larger team last year. We had to adjust a little bit with some changes in plan. So I'm trying to push my team to think like entrepreneurs, and some of them are responding very well. So what does it mean to think like an entrepreneur? It means that you go all out and you find a way to make it happen, right? And you keep doing it. That's where the perseverance and dedication part comes in. You keep doing it until you find a solution. Of course, you don't just keep doing something that's impossible. If it's really impossible, that's why I say you need to keep finding ways to do it. If that way doesn't work, find another way. If that way doesn't work, find another way. And keep doing it. It's about the effort and the intensity of how much you do. And, even today, I do a lot of things that are theoretically not scalable in that sense. Right? Because it needs to be done, and I can't think of a better way to do it, so we just keep doing it that way. Yeah. So what entrepreneurs need to summarize is, the desire to keep pushing and to keep trying until it works, right? And to have the commitment and perseverance to keep doing it until you reach that point of inflection or tipping point where you see results. Yeah.
Nice. What have you changed your mind about in the last few years, and why?
All right. So I think it's a very insightful question. In the past, maybe I can just share something a little bit deep or personal. So when you do business, you have a lot of stakeholders, from your own partners to investors to shareholders to collaborators and so on. In the past, I always tried and many times failed to understand and please everyone. Okay, that was just, I guess, in my nature. And those people who feel that, there are people who may feel that I did not do it properly, right? But at that time, I tried to, and it's impossible. You cannot please all stakeholders. You cannot appease all stakeholders. And at the end of the day, not everybody can understand things in the same way. Right? And maybe I'm understanding it a different way, he's understanding a different way. There's no such thing as he's right, I'm wrong, and I'm wrong, and he's right. It's just a difference of perspective. And so there's a difference of expectation. So what I realized today is that sometimes you're just not going to be aligned with everyone, even those you feel you should be aligned with or you want to be aligned with. Yeah? So you have to accept that people will have different opinions and different understanding and different expectations. At the end of the day, it is to acknowledge that, fine, you think this way, I think this way, we think differently. Let's accept this change, this difference of opinion or difference of approach, and see how we can still move forward without conflict, right? And that I have learned the hard way, right? And I will not go into detail. I did give some examples earlier on, but basically, you cannot appease everyone and you cannot try and be aligned with everyone. As long as you believe what you're doing is right, you try and make people understand. If they don't understand, then try to make sure there's no conflict and that you can move on without having bad blood, because life is short, we're here to do good things. There's no point
Correct.
having bad blood with anyone, even if that person did something wrong with you, against you. I think there's no point, holding a grudge.
Right. Two more questions.
For sure. It's 1.5 hours. I'm happy to share.
Okay. What is the worst advice you ever received or heard that is been
Worst
dispensed in
advice?
your world? Yeah.
Well, as an entrepreneur, accidentally doing new things, a lot of people will tell you don't do it. Right? So that's the worst advice. And very sincere people who have been there and who are trying to help you will tell you don't do it. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be impossible. Like, for example, when we first started doing Indonesian projects, I met with a few relatives who had good intentions and who had done business in Indonesia, and they said, "Don't do it. Don't waste your time."
Yes.
Right? Why? And they give you all sorts of different reasons based on their experience.
Yep.
Right? But if you're going to take all the negatives of every opportunity, you're never going to do anything. Yeah. So don't do it is a bad advice. It's more of think carefully how you're going to do it, and think of different scenarios on how this may turn out. Right? Because it's always good to be prepared. As an entrepreneur, you cannot prepare for everything, and you're always on the move, pivoting, adjusting, pushing, maneuvering, and all that. But it's always a good exercise to do future planning with different scenarios. And sometimes you forget that you already went through that process. And when you're at a certain point of like, okay, I decide to do this and that, I discuss with people and we decide to take a certain path. And then I dig up old papers or old plans that I had, and I realize, oh, this is what I planned to do last time. And then now, because of circumstance, we're doing it. So, subconsciously, it's also in your mind that you have these kind of options available. Yeah. So always do this kind of scenario analysis as much as you can, especially in a world today which is so ambiguous and volatile, right? Again, you cannot plan exactly what will happen, but it's a good exercise to plan different scenarios.
Nice. I always ask this to all my guests at the end. What's your definition of a great leader?
All right. It's honestly very tough to be a great leader. And the greatest leader ever, of course, is our Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, Nabi Muhammad. But in today's world, I guess a good leader is someone who's able to bring out the best in his people and able to lead his people to his vision, while also being able to accomplish their own different subsets of vision, right? So I say this, but I'm also struggling with it. It's not easy. Alhamdulillah, I believe I do have a group of people with us who are very well aligned and fully committed, inshallah. But it's not easy doing that, right? So a leader has to balance all sorts of things. We have to make sure the people around us are motivated, are well taken care of. We are fair to them. At the same time, also, we have to make sure that we show the right example. Sometimes there's all sorts of pressure and stress, and we can't take it out on our people. We have to find a way to package it in a way that motivates them instead, and these kind of things. So to me, there's no such thing as a bad follower or bad employees or staff. If there's a failure in any of in a business or in the people associated with a business, then it has to go back to the leader for not being able to take care of that, right? But the second thing I want to add, which is a very important disclaimer, is that a leader cannot do all of this himself alone. A leader needs a second layer of leadership, right? So within your company, we need to be able to empower other leaders. And even today, in a very flat hierarchy kind of approach, even junior people or new people need to be empowered in their own scope. Right? So to me, that's what leadership is about. And unfortunately, I see a lot of very big, strong, especially Muslim businesses, I don't know why, in Singapore and Malaysia, where the leader on top is a strong, leader, alpha male usually. Sometimes, of course, also a female. But the second layer is not empowered. And so there's a limit on what the organization can do, because they're all dependent on the leader who has made himself into a bottleneck, right? So, you have to balance a few different things, being facilitative, yet being firm, empowering, yet maintaining some form of control, So these are balances that always need to be worked on.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Okay, we come to the end of the podcast. Any last parting words that you want to say?
Sure. I think so a few things I want to share. In today's world, which is very, very volatile, very, very uncertain, a lot of challenges, a lot of pain and struggle. The key thing for everybody, and myself, I'm reminding myself, is to look at how in our own scope, in our own area, to focus on doing things that are right and that are good. Okay? And it is a continuous process. It's a continuous process. You don't immediately figure out how to do things the right way. And you make mistakes along the way. But you must always be sincere with yourself and your intention of what you want to do. So that's very, very important. And one of the individuals that I spoke to recently, quite a prominent individual, he made the same comment, which resonates with me a lot. Now, the second thing is to think big, really think big. The world as we know it has been changing for a long time.
Yeah.
And will continue to change much faster. The rate of change will only speed up, right? So, think big, explore opportunities. Don't constrain yourself to the shackles of how you have been brought up in society, because society itself takes time to understand its own change, right? So if you understand that things have changed so much and there's so much more that you can potentially do outside of what you have been looking at, then really the world is full of opportunities. With that, of course, comes your own knowledge, your own skill sets, your own network, which you continuously need to build so that you can go into these opportunities, more effectively, right? So I guess that's my parting shot. It's an open world today,
Nice.
where everybody is equally far or equally near. And you can you can provide services or provide value to your people around you, people halfway across the world. It's so open today. So, think about it that way, and from there, opportunities will open up, and the world becomes very, very exciting.
Nice. Quick question: how do we grow our beards like Umar Mushi?
I think first you start by not shaving. But it's a lot to do with genes as well, and I would like it to be thicker, but it's okay. It's good enough for now.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Umar. I think you've delivered so much value in this podcast, and I really
I hope
pray
so.
that Allah ease your burdens, or your to reach the goals that you want to reach. I think it will be a really, really good goal where everyone can just transact everything easily, in your platform. So thank you so much for doing this, and may Allah reward you for everything. Thank you.
I mean, inshallah, and the same for you as well.